Ultimately, the challenges of the 21st century can't be met without collective action. Agreement will almost never be easy, and results won't always come quickly. But I am committed to respecting different points of view. And to forging a consensus instead of dictating our terms. That's how we made progress in the last few days. And that's how we will advance and uphold our ideals in the months and years to come. You know, at home, I've often spoken about a new era of responsibility. And I believe strongly that this era must not end at our borders. In a world that's more and more interconnected. We all have responsibilities to work together to solve common challenges. And although it will take time, I am confident that we will rebuild global prosperity if we act with a common sense of purpose, persistence, and the optimism that the moment demands. So I appreciate your attention, and I'm going to take a few questions. I've got a list of a few people I'm going to call on and then I will intersperse some folks I'm calling on randomly. Helene Cooper. Q. President Obama, well, I think we did okay. You know, when I came here, it was with the intention of listening and learning. But also providing American leadership. And I think that the document that has been produced as well as the concrete actions that will follow reflect a range of our priorities. We wanted to make sure that we had a strong coordinated response to growth, and that's reflected in the document and in the actions that will be taken. We thought it was important to make sure that we had a strong, coordinated regulatory response, and many of the details of the regulatory response draw from principles that we had developed prior to coming here. We felt that it was very important to strengthen our international financial institutions because developing countries emerging markets are threatened even though they may not have been the cause of this crisis. They are threatened by capital flight, they're threatened by reduced trade finance. Drops in consumer demand in developed countries that were their export markets. And so we knew that it was going to be important to provide those countries with assistance. And we have created as fundamental a reworking of the resources available to these. International financial institutions as anything we've done in the last several decades. So, overall, I'm pleased with the product. And I'll leave it to others to determine whether me and my team had anything to do with that. All right? Chuck Todd. Chuck. Q. President Obama, well, as I said before, we've got a global economy. And if we're taking actions in isolation in the United States, but those actions are contradicted overseas, then we're only going to be halfway effective, maybe not even half. You've seen, for example, a drastic decline in U.S. exports over the last several months. You look at a company like Caterpillar, in my home state of Illinois, which up until last year was doing extraordinarily well. In fact, export growth was what had sustained it even after the recession had begun. As a consequence of the world recession, as a consequence of the contagion from the financial markets debilitating the economies elsewhere, Caterpillar is now in very bad shape. So if we want to get Caterpillar back on its feet, if we want to get all those export companies back on their feet, so that they are hiring, putting people back to work. Putting money in people's pockets, we've got to make sure that the global economy as a whole is successful. And this document, which affirms the need for all countries to take fiscal responses that increase demand. That encourages the openness of markets. Those are all going to be helpful in us being able to fix what ails the economy back home. Let me mix in a Justin Webb, BBC. Where's Justin? There he is. Go ahead. Q. President Obama, why don't you get a microphone? See, everybody is complaining. I'm sure that's all your fellow British journalists. Q. President Obama, well, I think that if you look at the language of the document, there are probably some areas where it wasn't so much of a sacrifice as it might not have been our number one priority. But it became clear that it was very important to certain other actors. I'd rather not specify what those precise items would be, because this is a collective document. but there's no doubt that each country has its own quirks and own particular issues that a leader may decide is really really important, something that is non-negotiable for them. And what we tried to do as much as possible was to accommodate those issues in a way that did not hamper the effectiveness of the overall document to address what I think are the core issues related to this crisis. Now, keep in mind I think that this kind of coordination really is historic. I said in the meeting that if you had imagined 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, that you'd have the leaders of Germany, France, China, Russia, Brazil, South Africa, a president of the United States named Obama, former adversaries, in some cases former mortal enemies. Negotiating this swiftly on behalf of fixing the global economy, you would have said, that's crazy. And yet it was happening, and it happened with relatively little. Relatively few hiccups. And I think that's a testimony to the great work that Gordon Brown did, and his team, in organizing the summit. The collective work in our teams in doing some good preparation, some good groundwork. So I'm very proud of what's been done. This alone is not enough. And obviously the actions that each of us take in our individual countries are still absolutely vital. So we have a set of principles, for example, around dealing with systemic risk that I think will be very important in preventing the kinds of financial crises that we've seen. That does not entirely solve the problem of toxic assets that are still in you. banks and certain British banks and certain European banks. And how each individual nation acts to deal with that is still going to be vitally important. How well we execute the respective stimulus programs around the world is going to be very important. The quicker they are, the more effective they are at actually boosting demand, the more all of us will benefit. The more encumbered they are by bureaucracy and mismanagement and corruption. That will hamper our development efforts as a whole. So this is not a panacea, but it is a critical step, and I think it lays the foundation so that should the actions that we've taken individually and collectively so far not succeed in boosting global demand and growth, should you continue to see a freezing of credit or a hemorrhaging of jobs around the world, I think we've created a good foundation for this leadership to come back together again and take additional steps until we get it right. Okay, Michael Shear. Where's Michael? Q. President Obama, well, you know, I didn't accompany President Bush on his various summits. So I don't know how he was operating. And I won't warrant a guess on that. I can tell you that what I've tried to do since I started running for president and since I was sworn in as president. Is to communicate the notion that America is a critical actor and leader on the world stage. And that we shouldn't be embarrassed about that, but that we exercise our leadership best when we are listening. When we recognize that the world is a complicated place and that we are going to have to act in partnership with other countries. when we lead by example, when we show some element of humility and recognize that we may not always have the best answer. But we can always encourage the best answer and support the best answer. So I think that's the approach that we've tried. To take in our foreign policy since my administration came in. Now, we come in at extraordinarily challenging times. And yet I actually think that calls for this type of leadership even more. But, ultimately, we won't know how effective we are until we look back a year from now. Or 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, and see if it worked. And what the American people care about, I suspect, are the same thing that the British people care about. And that is, are you putting people back to work? Are businesses growing again? Is credit flowing again? And, and that's just true with respect to the summit. But when it comes to our Afghanistan policy, the question is going to be: have we made ourselves safer? Have we reduced the risks and incidents of terrorism? And so the proof of the pudding is in the eating. But hopefully, I think at least we've set a tone internationally. Where people don't, where they give us the benefit of the doubt. They're still going to have their interests, and we're going to have ours. There are going to be tough negotiations, and sometimes we're going to have to walk. Away from those negotiations if we can't arrive at a common accord. There are Going to be real dangers that can't always be talked through and have to be addressed. But at least we can start with the notion that we're prepared to. Listen and to work cooperatively with countries around the world.